So we want to work with the industry, with government agencies, and we want to ensure that we drive the green mobility in India. So clearly that is in line with our global vision as well. So when it comes to electric vehicles, there are three main challenges that we have heard from our customers and also consumers in India. The first one being the affordability. So as an OEM, it is very important for us to address that. We spoke about the hen and the the egg story. What MD Bescom mentioned. The demand today is quite low. Last year, the industry saw over 3,500 electric vehicle sale in India, and there are different views about the electric vehicle adoption in India. So the pessimistic approach would lead it to around 2 to 3% in 2025, where the optimistic approach would take it from 5 to 10%, right? So clearly as OEM, we need to create awareness and we need to work on the adoption. So one of the key areas that we focus on is to make it easily accessible for the mass market, how to make it more affordable. And that is our continuous endeavor to work on new technologies, be it new battery technologies, increasing the battery density, coming up with new innovation, and obviously we need to work on the components as well to ensure that this makes the electric vehicles affordable in the future, because today we have a wide spectrum from the entry level to the high end range. So that would be one of our key focus area, and I believe that with a progressive state like Karnataka and with all the agencies, government agencies support, I think we can work together and create the demand, create awareness. Another thing I want to highlight is this year Hyundai Motor acquired business from EESL to deliver 100 Hyundai Kona EV to government agencies in India. So this is one way of creating awareness. When you see somebody in the government using an electric vehicle for their day-to-day use, so that creates a lot of awareness, and that will also drive consumption. So one of our recommendations for Karnataka government is also to increase the usage and adoption of electric vehicle, which will indirectly create awareness and demand in the state as well. And I'm very happy to say that Karnataka state is very important for Hyundai Motor India, because it is in the top 3 in terms of EV sales for Hyundai. So very important. And we are also looking forward, to collaborate in the area of technology or charging infrastructure moving forward. Another important aspect I want to highlight to all the panel members, we spoke about ecosystem, but what is very important is collaboration. See, we all have challenge in terms of volume, right? So I'm only speaking in terms of four-wheelers, right? Passenger vehicles. So how do you justify volume? Right, MD Bescom mentioned about 1% utilization. Is it really advisable for each one of us to work on charging infrastructure, or should we all collaborate together and establish the infrastructure and ensure that our customers, the users, have the best coverage across India? Right, so that is one of the important points I would like to highlight to the panelists. And Hyundai Motor India has collaborated with IOCL, and we have set up charging infrastructure with them, including Bengaluru city. And we have also collaborated with EESL in setting up of charging infrastructure across India. So we are also looking at other partners, and we want to ensure that our customers are able to use the charging infrastructure across India. And I want industry to come together and ensure that we synergize together. Because the two other concerns for an electric vehicle consumer today is range anxiety and availability of charging infrastructure. While we are able to work on high performance vehicles and solve the range anxiety, we have to also work together on the availability of the public charging infrastructure. Another important point I would like to highlight to the panel members and for consideration of the Karnataka government is we have a lot of policies in terms of electric vehicles or electric vehicle manufacturing, but as a progressive state, can Karnataka come up with non-fiscal incentives, right? Can there be priority parking spots? Yeah, can there be dedicated lanes for electric vehicles, right? So Karnataka launched lanes for bicycles, right, recently. So can there be dedicated lanes? Because this creates a lot of awareness. People observe, and then this will indirectly again add to the demand. So I'm not going to talk about the supply side demand, because we already spoke about FAME 2, all the policies. As a manufacturer, we clearly need support because we have to justify volume. So I agree with all the panel members in terms of supply side demand. But what I want to highlight is on the actual purchase and adoption. So I want industry to consider that. And when we look at all the other states, and Karnataka being the first one to roll out the EV policies, there is something that the state can also, learn from the other states in terms of the incentives. Not only the tax exemption, but also there could be some incentives in the form of cash incentives, at least for a certain vehicle, so that we trigger the demand, and then that demand leads to the mass adoption of the electric vehicles. So, Giri Prakash, those are my thoughts. I'm willing to take any further questions or add any further based on the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh. Very relevant points. Most of us have been discussing about charging points. So obvious, it's pretty obvious that I'm going to draw in Mr. Piyush Gupta, CEO of Lithium Power Private Limited, and on the kind of infrastructure that we have. We understand that China is the fourth largest, has the fourth largest reserve of lithium, and China actually manufactures over 80% of all EVs globally. Now, one of the biggest components of the electric vehicle is the lithium-ion battery, and actually that pushes up the cost quite significantly. Taking from there, I would like to ask Mr. Gupta on how does one see to it that, one of the reasons why it's a challenge to go ahead and buy an electric vehicle, a car or any vehicle or anything like that, is the prohibitive cost that is involved. Would you like to share your thoughts on that, Mr. Gupta? You'll have to unmute, Mr. Gupta.
Okay, thanks, Giri Prakash, and good afternoon, everyone. So, in terms of your question around the cost for lithium-ion mining, what exactly is your question? Your question pertains to setting up of cell manufacturing in India, or what is it about?
Yeah, it actually, it's a bit of a broad sweep out there. We know that most of the lithium-ion, battery comes out of China because it produces that much, so many electric cars, and I also understand it has the fourth largest reserve as well. So for a country like India, how do we go about seeing that the costs are less? Are you looking at certain incentives from the government? You are there, you do, are the CEO of the Lithium Power Private Limited. I would like to know what are the kind of challenges that you face? What are the stakeholders telling you?
Perfect. So just a bit of an introduction. We operate battery swap stations for last mile delivery, right? We focus exclusively on two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And again, this is a Karnataka specific discussion, so there's a bit of a disclaimer. We actually do not have much of an operation in Karnataka. So whatever information I would be able to share is largely from my perspective in Delhi, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, the states that we work extensively in. Yeah. So I think overall there are two different points that I would like to make. Right. So one, I think the question was around how do we get India to start manufacturing batteries, and your question was around, do we have access to lithium-ion as a material? Well, the plain fact is we don't have a single cell manufacturing setup in India. Yeah. And the basic reason for that is we are so much far behind in the learning curve on lithium-ion cell manufacturing. It would be well impossible for any private sector player right? To basically set up a cell manufacturing plant and still be competitive with, let's say, China, Korea, or Japan, right? When we are looking at any semiconductor or any cell manufacturing plant, we are looking at a couple of $1 billion of investment in the entire supply chain. Yeah, and worldwide, the experience has been the first one to invest in such a supply chain generally goes bankrupt, right? Because again, supply chain doesn't get set up in 1 year or 2 years. For you to mature a supply chain, it takes 3, 4, 5 years. And generally, the private sector does not have that amount of capital or patience to develop a supply chain, unless somebody's taking a 10, 15, 20 years view, right? So, in general, whichever country you look at, when we are looking at transformative technologies such as, lithium-ion cell manufacturing, or for that matter, any other transformative technology, which is material science related, in general, the government incentives play a very, very significant role. I'm generally for a lot of private sector laissez-faire kind of an approach. But when you are building critical blocks of infrastructure, and which cannot be solved on a $5 million or a $10 million kind of a budget, you generally need to get governments involved. Yeah, whether it comes through a government subsidy or whether it comes through, or better, it should come through a public sector undertaking, taking up, creating a capacity building for the nation, right? So that's my view on how India, or for that matter, specifically Karnataka, can solve this problem of, nobody in India having a cell manufacturing plant. That's my view of we should go about solving this problem. Right. I think the larger discussion we were having today is around how do we promote the electric vehicles in Karnataka, or for that matter, rest of India as well. So I just have two very specific, suggestions or points of view that I wanted to put across the panel. One essentially is that obviously you can have a supply side kind of an intervention or a demand side kind of an intervention. Supply side kind of intervention is around, relaxing the regulations or giving special permits. That's an affirmative action from the government, and the government generally has to give something to the industry for creating a supply side, right? A different way is essentially creating a demand from the industry, right? I'll give you a very specific example of how demand can be created without too much of an effort. We have spoken a lot about the last mile, which is two-wheelers and three-wheelers based e-commerce based deliveries. If there is a way by which we can mandate, and again, mandate is a very subjective word, or incentivize, or find whatever is the right word, right? That all the e-commerce deliveries in Bangalore, whether it is a food delivery, whether it is an Amazon delivery, whether it's a Flipkart delivery, or whether it's a Bounce, or whether it's a Blue, yeah, it's going to happen only on an e-platform. That's just significantly powerful, right? And then leave it to the industry to find the ways to solve the problem. Yeah, the industry will not ask for any incentives to solve the problem, because they're already assured that there is going to be $1 billion market in Bangalore itself, or in Mysore itself, and they will find ways by which they can fulfill that demand, right? So this is a very simple way by which you can fill in on the demand side. On the supply side, we have been talking about, and I think Mrs. Gunjan did share, the incentives and the slides, the beautifully done slide on what are the incentives which are being shared by the Karnataka government. I think, that's fantastic. But my prognosis generally is around, how do you help create the demand? And fundamentally, electric vehicles are cheaper they're fundamentally cheaper than petrol or diesel combustion engines. If you look at the total cost of ownership, is 25 to 45% lower. All we just need to do is just create an enabling environment and just a bit of a push to create the demand, and the industry will take care of itself.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. When we were interacting yesterday, and I would like to bring back to Somaini on this. We are talking about, when you're telling me about how there are hardly any incentives in some of the northern states, and how there's a huge boom out there. I'd like to draw the attention of Mr. Maini and say that is the state or the central governments, are these incentives really that important for you to see that there is more consumption of EVs. This is a debate that I would like to throw open to the floor. Mr. Maini first.
Sure. I think, Giri, in the early stages, certain concessions help because the cost of everything is higher, right? So you want to balance that off a little bit on this area. But as Piyush also mentioned, it's also newer business models. Areas like battery swapping can allow you to have vehicles that are the same price as a regular vehicle, and the cost of energy that can be equivalent or cheaper. And today we have three-wheelers running in Chandigarh that people can buy a electric three-wheeler that's cheaper than a diesel three-wheeler, and of course the cost of energy is much cheaper. Now that's great because we can actually achieve that today with a combination of business models on this area, right? The second part is about partnerships of it coming through, because how do you create this now? And you need everyone to come together to make it happen, right? So you want, from a demand point of view, all of that to come together. So things that we've done is try to get an IOCL that can look at infrastructure, a large player, get on people like Uber and stuff who can create the demand from this front, work with the companies on the ecosystem. So if it's making business sense, then the next step is how do you get all these players on that platform to get this area, right? Which is to me this. And I think the government's role is to make sure that the policies are agnostic and they are creating a platform approach to allow us to accelerate. That's the role of the government. And I think as Mr. Gadkari ji had also said in the beginning, he says, we don't care about the technology. We would like to do all technologies and promote all of them. And in fact, their department recently allowed things like separating of batteries and vehicles. But the reality is, if an end customer wants to get a concession on using the battery, which is separated, that's not possible today, or there's a challenge with that compared to if he has to buy the battery. So therefore, there are gaps where there's a non-uniformity of policy. And so a lot of these customers who want to jump on are waiting to say what is happening out there. So if there's a policy uniformity and if there's a platform support on this area, I think that the technologies are at the right stage that they can make business sense in some places. And we should start from there. So even as Mahesh alluded to, it makes business sense for three-wheelers today on this area. Push areas which make business sense for the entire economy on this front. Then adoption will be automatically. So open the loopholes in that area, start in those places, and then slowly other places can move forward. But have it concrete and focused. So we hear it right through around this area. So policy and subsidies are critical for the short stage, but they're not there for the long stage. They're just enough to probably trigger the demand, get things going, right? And then I think by itself, things will move ahead. And that's where it's been globally, that the first few years are required on this area. And that's where our suggestion would be for things like on the two-wheelers, two strokes conversion was there. Well, if people want to adopt electric, give people some concession on this area. It's a small amount, but it'll help them. You need to do that after a year from today or 18 months from today? Maybe not. Let them experience electric, let the drivers experience, let the users experience it. You back it off after that. But get a first 5,000, 10,000 on the road, enough to build a demand, and then let the market take it by itself. But we need sufficient volume to create awareness. People should experience it coming out of a metro station, that what is it to get into an electric auto, or delivery, your food is delivered on this area and how nice it is. Once there's experiences, they will choose for that and they'll opt for it. So that part I think is critical in the beginning on the subsidy side.
Thank you, Mr. Maini. I know I'm going to slightly go away from electric mobility because of the fact that we have Mr. Shekhar Viswanathan there, and he's a strong advocate of hybrid technology. I would like to know at least one or 2 points on how does he look at this entire scenario. He drives the electric mobility, the issue from FICCI, from the industry. If you could share your thought.
Thank you, Giri, and good to see you after a long time on the screen, so to speak, as indeed it has been good to see all my other friends over here. No, I think this issue about hybrid, and it's not really, and it's been wrongly positioned as hybrid versus electric, and that's really not the case. Hybrid is just a subset of electric vehicles. I think the stand that we have been taking all along is, yes, electric vehicles have to find their place within the vehicle environment. And we believed that that electric vehicle population will be between 20 to 30% of the total vehicle population over a 30-year period, because it takes time for people to adapt charging infrastructure to come in place, etc., etc. Hybrid vehicles are also electric vehicles, except that they are not as efficient as pure electric vehicles, because there is some amount of pollution, because they do rely on gasoline to power them. That's the only point that we have made. In addition, the advantage it confers is that when you build your battery ecosystem, this adds to the total volume of batteries that is getting built. Electric vehicles will demand some level of batteries and battery cells to be built, so also will hybrids. So it's more like an addendum. And the more the volume, the lesser is the cost likely to be. And I think that's the point that we have been pushing. Unfortunately, it has not been well understood in many quarters, and it has been wrongly positioned as one versus the other, which it is not. Were you looking for anything in addition to what I've stated so far, or have I answered your question?
Mr. Vishwanathan, you heard all the speakers. You heard Ms. Gunjan Krishna also, the BESCOM MD as well. I'm sure you have certain thoughts to share on this, and then how would you want to? What are your thoughts on that? On whatever that has happened so far?
See, I mean, I'm sorry, but I was not paying attention to the entire discussion because there were some other things that I had to attend to. But anyway, I think there are a couple of points I'd like to make, in this whole discussion. It's excellent that the government of Karnataka has actually rolled out this energy storage policy and an EV policy, and I do think that's really the way to go. And I think every state has actually adopted it. One of the states, and I believe that is Uttar Pradesh, if I'm not mistaken, has said they will encourage EVs and hybrids, but only if manufacturing takes place there. Now, I do think that there is a limitation to the number of manufacturing locations you can have. Even if you look at the internal combustion engine manufacturing space, the number of individual locations where people have set up factories has been extremely limited. For example, we came in 1997 and we have only one manufacturing location. I don't know about Hyundai, but I do think that they only have one manufacturing location.
Yeah.
And so even Maruti Suzuki, which is our biggest player, has had just essentially one manufacturing location. Then they went in further into Haryana with a second manufacturing location. And only now they had looked at a third manufacturing location, which was actually owned by Suzuki. So I don't think, you're going to have, that many manufacturing locations, even if when it comes to electric vehicles, unless you redefine manufacturing just to mean that you'll just put battery and do an assembly kind of operation, which I don't think is the intent either of the government or of industry. So that's one point that I thought I should highlight in this discussion, which perhaps has not been made earlier.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts on this. I understand Ms. Gunjan Krishna has prior engagement, so she has requested that she would like to leave this panel discussion. Thank you very much, ma'am. So what it means is that now we have participation from more private players. But there is one thing that I would like to talk about. Ather Energy set up its unit here, and Ola is also planning to do set up a manufacturing plant. But I see that while quite a few of them have used the talent that is there as far as Bangalore is concerned, but when it comes to uh, bigger investment, they look elsewhere. And I would like to know, how do you look at it? Why is it that the Karnataka government, or for that matter, the players here are not able to sustain these kind of operations? And it's not just about expansion; it's about going ahead and looking at other options as well. Can I bring in Mr. Mahesh Babu back into play here?
I think this is the right thing to be talked by Mr. Kunjan Madam. I'm not the right one to talk about where they are going.
From the industry perspective.
Since I was heading the cluster for EV in Karnataka with the government of Karnataka, I can give some insights on this. So the investment is based on many policies. I think if you ask me, Karnataka government has a very progressive industrial policy. Now, do other states have? Many of the states have very progressive industrial policy. Most of them are struggling to differentiate between EV industrial policy and their own industrial policy. So I think most of them, for example, even in Karnataka, we are trying to link the EV incentives to regular industrial policy as well. So I don't think the decision to be in a particular state is based on only incentive. I think as an industry, we look at many factors. We look at factors like proximity to our customers, which is the right talent available for the industrial, and many more. So I can't comment on others, but what I can say as Mahindra, we have a factory in Bangalore. Government have been very, very supportive for industrial. We went for recent expansion against EV policy. The expansion is just completed, and we are ramping up the capacity. We are also building up a R&D center in Bangalore, as Dr. Goenka has announced. It's going to be one of the kind India's, what I would say, landmark R&D for EV facilities. So I don't see any reason any particular reason because the government policy or because of government approach people have gone out. Maybe it may be due to other factors other than government policies and government support. I have seen actually the Karnataka single window and industrial support to starting up has been one of the benchmark in the country. So I don't see any specific reason. It may be due to non-governmental and procedural decisions would have forced people to go out.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mahesh Babu. Before we wind up the panel discussion, I would like to recall Mr. Gowda, and if he can give us his thoughts on the entire discussion.
After the entire discussion, see, DESCOM's role is to provide basically initial public charging infrastructure should be there so that our vehicles will come, and probably ensure that the facilitation happen through a series of things like maybe the real estate cost is higher so that we can give some of the places from government and semi-government places for people to establish the infrastructure. So recently we have signed a MOU with NTPC and REIL. They will come out with another 140 in another 140 locations. They will come out with the charging infrastructure in maybe in 2-3 months time, because we have given them the place and they are through the tendering process. So Bangalore will have maybe around 140 plus 130, maybe up to 300 charging stations. But what I can see here is when Gadkariji, our Honorable Minister, was saying that 18% of our energy is through guzzling of fossil fuels. So the major guzzlers were the heavy trucks which are on this road, on the highways, on the Pune highway. Then you look at Delhi Jaipur highway. Now, what we are saying that if all ESCOMs can be challenged, that if you can create something of a pantograph or something like where a corridor can be created and all these trucks without even battery can really run on a corridor at a certain speed. That is what one thing which would change the whole game. That is what for the ESCOMs also, because the more integration of RE, I mean solar, the price of tariff will come down because our power purchase cost will come down. So I think a big push should be there here. The second big push can be, making things really mandatory on the retail side and the demand side. So all these new buildings which are there should have a solar rooftop with at least 30% of charging. Storage. So if that battery storage is there, then probably they can charge their vehicles overnight. That is one thing. And the third thing is that, the vehicles can be rolled out of these auto companies without a battery. Like the battery cost is so big that the vehicle will come without a battery, and there will be a free float of swapping stations everywhere. Like the gas cylinders, you pull out a battery and just put it into the vehicle, and it's available everywhere. If that type of situation, what MindEnergy has got is this Mind can come out, and a lot of investment and whatever subsidies can be around that swapping. And then that could be, I think, can be a big a game changer. So I think today I didn't see Tatas and Leyland stakeholders who, these are the big guzzlers of fossil fuel, and probably ESCOMs can be challenged, and we can create the infrastructure when a corridor can be created. I don't know about the e-highway. I have not seen how it works. But initially, we have seen the railways doing a big job. A lot of savings on, on all the guzzling of locomotives which were being done. So something which the fast chargers are really going to this. Slow chargers will never be psychologically tempting for any consumer to go for these vehicles. So we are all ready. We are all set. Now we are ready to facilitate everything from BESCOM side, as we are the nodal agency for the whole state. So that is from our side. Thank you.
Giri, just to add to what Mr. Gada just said on this area, I think what's recently, BESCOM has always been the leadership, and I think very few states in the country have taken putting up 130 stations on this area. So that's been a commendable job by BESCOM. And even if it's only 1% utilized, I think that once it's there, people will start to come up. So I think the taking the initiative has been great on this area. But what would be helpful, I think, is what I'm seeing in states like Delhi. They've identified around 250 locations around the city. And they are trying to open up to say we have all things. We need two-wheeler charging, we need three-wheeler charging, we need car charging, we need battery swapping. We set up these common centers where they become electric vehicle charging hubs, because then the electric infrastructure can be common, costs can be lower, and then multiple private players can come in. So BESCOM can trigger these, but then private players come and co-invest, and it should be in a transparent way that multiple players can come in. So we create the entire infra, but we create a lower cost for all of them and put this. So this is something as BESCOM is already looking and partnering. How could we make common places across the city which could lower costs for everyone and create the right infrastructure for the citizens of Bangalore?
Thank you, Mr. Maini. I must also say, I must give credit to Mr. Mr. Rajesh Gowda to say you have come up with extremely relevant ideas which can be put into practice. And I do know that all of us will want to that. The government, I'm sure this will set government, and Ms. Gujan Krishna already said they are going to tweak this policy, come out with better incentives. For taking time off. Thank you. I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Kamath for his concluding remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Giri Prakash. A very well moderated panel discussion, and there is absolutely like a progressive approach from the government of Karnataka, and Mr. Gupta was held up with with our chief minister, and he had excused and he has said that whatever the recommendations are there from our team, definitely will look into that, and there is an assurance from his side. And Kunjan Krishna Madam, and also from Westcom MD, Mr. Gowda. Overall, it looks like the way how we are positioned as Bangalore as a e-capital. I think all of us should work together with the government, and they are approachable. And whatever we say from the industry perspective, definitely they're willing to listen to us. So we have all the industry stalwarts in this panel. I think we can make a good memorandum to take it to the ministry, and whatever the recommendations we need to take it up, we can do that. And I'm sure with the kind of the respect what Mr. Maini has with the government all over the country, what he has done for the industry, under his leadership, definitely we can make a huge difference to the industry, to the consumer, to the environment. It is a tough thing because it takes lots of patience, which we have, and with the help from the union government, and this is the first time we are seeing after 30 years, both union government and the state government, the ministers are very cooperative. Both belongs to the same party, and especially the union ministry is willing to talk to the industry, like on one-to-one basis, which you have seen today. The conversation between him and Mr. Goenka was very cordial, and willing to share their experiences, willing to take the recommendation. And with my like little experience, I've never seen in any panel the ministers talking so cordially with the industry and asking them to come with a piece of paper, and he will say either yes or no, and which has been the experience in the past. And my request to all the panel members is that let's get together once again and try to put everything thoughts in paper and make it as a memorandum, both at the national level, at the state level, and put our best effort to get the things what we want. And all I can say from FICCI Karnataka State Council is that it has been very intellectual. It was very electrifying and stimulating the conversation what we had right from 11 o'clock. And I thank each one of you for your participation, and it's just a beginning of our conversation, and we'll take it forward. And my special thanks to Chetan Maini sir for having driven this very meaningful dialogue with the state government, and also to Mr. Mahesh Babu and all of the people who have participated here. And thank you very much from my side personally to everyone. Thank you, Mr. Shivana. You have been a great support for us.
Thank you. Good day.
Giri Prakash, you have done a fantastic moderation, and thank you very much for that too.